All right, we're 2 minutes past, so let's get going. So, we got a ton of slides. We've got some national story, and then we've got some Colorado story. Next week, for those of you before you ask, we're going to be doing a little deep dive into what's going on in the mountains we're going to talk about Summit County. We're going to talk about Eagle County. We're going to talk about some of the ski communities in the central part of the state. But today it's more of a Denver, Colorado Springs based conversation, right, Charles?
Yes, sir.
All right, but we're starting with housing market inertia grows at 48%. You know, Charles, I used to teach physics before I got into real estate, and we talk about inertia left a lot in physics. You know, an object that's in motion stays in motion, and an object at rest stays at rest. And what we're seeing here is that people at rest are staying put. 48% of homeowners never considered moving this year, and that number is up. And what we're finding is that it used to be that people said, I'm sticking where I am because of rates, but mortgage rates are actually mattering less today than they were before. And what matters today more is life uncertainty. Life uncertainty is becoming a bigger issue. People are staying put because they don't know if their job is secure, because they're taking care of aging parents and grandparents, because their families are changing. And the author of this study from an organization called Point says that homeowners are feeling emotionally locked in. 83% say that they won't get unlocked until rates are under 5%. And many people are just psychologically attached to their current payment. Charles, what did you pick up in here?
Yeah, I think that it goes back to the conversations that we're having inside of our offices, right? Is that when I think a lot of us got to this point in 2021 where people were just moving for the sake of moving, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, you know what? I want a different view from, the other side of the street. And yet, when we're talking about how we have a big business inside of real estate, we know that we need to be in as many conversations as we possibly can and be in emotional proximity to the people. So when they're thinking about transacting business, they're thinking of us. And so what makes people move into where Russ's point was is it's life events, it's marriage, it's babies, it is promotions, it is being transferred, it's all the things. And so as a real estate agent, we look at this and we say, okay, this makes sense. You know what? This is different than what we experienced in 2021. And yet I only have one job to be in relationship with as many people as possible because I don't know what their job's going to look like. I don't know what their family situations are going to look like, but I do know that I am going to be their real estate economist of choice and be that person that they call. And so I need to be in emotional proximity to them when this stuff happens.
Yeah. You know, I was just thinking as you're talking, I was driving into the subdivision that I live in on Friday, and you know, I got kind of narrow streets. It's an older neighborhood, big trees, and the streets are lined with contractor trucks. The guy next door to me refinishing his lower level. The guy on the other side, kitchens and baths. I'm putting in a bath right over there. In fact, you might hear the work in the background. Two doors down, kitchen. Like everybody on my street is doing this. They are not considering moving. They are upgrading. They are spending more on their house. Nearly half of people are considering renovation, and it's trapping equity. So
Yeah.
interesting piece of the puzzle. Let's move on. Gary Keller, for some reason, is all of a sudden writing lots of articles and publishing lots of op-eds. And he's got a real bug up his butt about private listings. And he just put together a op-ed that got picked up everywhere, pushing back on private listings. Now, what he's saying is that limiting the exposure of a listing can hurt pricing, it can hurt competition, and that private doesn't really mean private. It just means shared with fewer people, shared internally only. It means not exposed to the fair market. And, you know, Gary's concern about all of this is that the public doesn't understand that when the listing agent pushes pocket listing or private listing or office exclusive, the public doesn't understand that fewer eyes are actually going to get to see it, and that the more eyes that do see it tend to push up the price. I just mentioned my neighbor next door. They, I won't get into the details, but one person saw the house. It never hit the MLS. That person put in an offer. And I would say that based on my knowledge of living in the same neighborhood for 20 years, I would say they probably got 10% less on that house next door than they would have got had they stuck a sign in the yard and allowed the market to do its job. And Gary says that what's happening here is the MLS, the value of the MLS is being challenged because a lot of houses are only hitting the MLS because they're failing privately. So the MLS just
Yeah.
becomes sort of like the leftovers market. What else is in here?
Yeah, you know what? When I look at this, I think of the other side of this coin is yes, that we don't believe that this is in the consumer's best interest. And the people that are going through, the agents that are sitting down and they're having this conversation at the dining room table, they're really doing it in self-interest. And that's what's super unfortunate. But this is what we do know. We do know that you are at one of three real estate brokerages in the world that owns its own tech. And with that being said, that if we do get to a place where let's just pretend that the MLS does disappear because it's been devalued so much by all these things that are happening outside of our Keller Williams ecosystem, that we are just one push of the button away to be able to take our listings and just push them on KW websites,
Right.
which is really cool to think about. Because while we don't think that this is a world that we want to play in, we do know that this is a world that we can play in. And what that means is being a part of the largest real estate brokerage under one brand, under one logo, which is Keller Williams. That what that means is that most of the transactions that are coming through our four walls, that people will be visiting our site for listings. And so, yes, we don't want to go down this road, but you guys are uniquely positioned to win this battle if this is what this turns into.
Yeah, it's not so bad for us, but it's awfully bad for sellers.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. All right. Job data stabilizes, giving Fed hawks more reason not to cut rates. So, like, it's so funny because we're all dying for rate cuts. Because to the point, two slides ago, some people are waiting for sub five in order to put their homes on the market. We know that when rates get cut, houses flood the market, which give us opportunities. Yet the labor market is stable, and and that's somewhat despite what might be said on your favorite or least favorite cable news channel. Jobs are still being added. The economy is slowing. It's not breaking, and the Fed now has cover to hold rates higher because the job market is good enough. It gives hawkish Fed members a reason to avoid cuts. Tell us about the inflation piece here, though.
Yeah, so when we're looking at this, guys, what we understand is that the Fed is a dual mandate Fed. One of the things that they're doing is they're trying to make sure that we have an acceptable amount of Americans without jobs, because that's truly what it is. Like, are we okay with X amount of Americans not having a job? And the second piece of this pendulum, or a teeter-totter, if you will, is that they are trying to make sure that prices stay down, right? Gas, eggs, salaries, right? Like all these different things. And so this is what they're trying to do. And so when we look at this and we're looking at this unemployment rate, and then we're seeing, okay, 4% of Americans that want a job don't have a job. And the Fed's like, that's a great number. We're okay with 4% of Americans not being employed. And they're fine with that. And let's just be very clear for this call. And it is super un-American to be cheering this on, but I want everyone to realize this. A recession is not a bad thing for real estate, right? A recession is actually really, really good for real estate. And yet we are not going to go home and champion this. If Americans lose jobs, that means they have to do something to stimulate the economy. And so they start making money cheaper, right? They start lending money to the banks at a cheaper rate. And then what happens? People go and they start borrowing money again. And so what they have going on right now is they're keeping rates elevated because not enough Americans are unemployed at this point. So
Right.
this is what we're going to be fighting. They're not going to go through and they're going to look at this. And when you look at it, we have government. Okay, that was Doge. That's what happened with that government section. We look at leisure and hospitality. We look at private education, professional businesses. Like they're looking at these numbers. Those are up. So we have government that's down. We have financial activities. We have information down. We have manufacturing down, and everything
I would
else is
assume information's down because of AI
yeah,
and
yeah.
financial
Like
activities down because of AI.
And they're saying that we're okay with this. And
Yeah.
so this is what we're going to be battling, guys. And so when we're going through, we have a slide on concessions later, and that's going to be some of the conversations we need to be having. Yeah, rates are up here. There's no sight of them dropping. If I had a crystal ball, I still couldn't even guarantee anything. But yet we have mechanisms inside of our contract to be able to get you better rates, and let's have those conversations. As a real estate economist of choice, guys, we need to be going out and talking about this and understanding it at some level.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. So, buying or selling a home in Denver this year, here are 5 questions you should ask. So, the Denver market is feeling unpredictably predictable. Activity picked up earlier than normal this year, and the warm winter shifted buyer and seller timing. What else is in here?
Yeah, so I think what was the interesting thing is we put this QR barcode in here for you guys if you want to go look at this census data. Now, this census data is a year old at this point because that's just how quickly our government works. But this is the latest. And when we look at this, guys, we can see that 42% of all homes in Colorado have an HOA,
Mhm.
which is leading the nation as far as
Yeah.
homes with have like we're in like the top five uh, states. And if we were to look across the board, across the United States, the average monthly fee for an HOA is $135. Guys, we have condos inside of Colorado that are around 500 plus.
Yeah.
And this is the unaffordability issue that we're running into. This is why the American dream is not dead in the United States. It's definitely not dead in Colorado, but it's taking longer to achieve it because of how expensive things are getting. So I think it was NAR Russ that went through and they looked and they said that the average first-time home buyer is what now 40?
41, I think.
Yeah, and when you look at it, they also said that they're putting 10% down. So when you look at this, you have a 40-year-old that's no longer eating avocado toast and living in their parents' basement, and I'm a millennial, so I'm allowed to say that. And what they're doing is now they've saved up 10% in the Denver metro, let's call it $60,000. And now they're facing a $600 HOA fee for a condo, which is what we would consider your first time home buyer market.
Yeah.
And this is what's slowing everything down. And you couple that HOAs, insurance, everything else, guys, like this is the psychology that we have to understand that our buyers are facing right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a real interesting market. I've got a child who's looking at buying a townhome, and the first thing we look at is HOA. We're seeing, and she's at the low end of this of the market in terms of price, but we're seeing $800, $700, $600, total different ball game. And but we're in a high hail area. Like every few years, a hailstorm comes through and we all get new roofs. It's crazy. I like this COVID pricing psychology is still lingering.
Yeah.
Some sellers still think their home is worth what it was worth in 2022, and some buyers think homes sitting 2+ weeks have issues. So it's very interesting. This is where, in fact, we're going to do it next week on the regional rally. Cooper's information about what's happening in Colorado, and he'll give us a full update about April is really important because, the way to combat myths is with truth. Let's dive into concessions. What are the trends with concessions?
All right. So this came from one of our friends at a title company, guys, and I think this is very, very important information to have, both as a listing agent and as a buyer's agent. And it's two totally different conversations, and yet what it does is it meets both parties in the middle to have a conversation to get a deal closed. And so what we're looking at is your top is April, and then your middle is over the last 12 months. And then there's just the graph at the bottom of both of those datas. And so what we can look at in the Denver metro is that 61% of all homes that were closed had a concession associated with them. All right. So 61%. And that average concession was, let's round it up, let's call it $10,000, $9,600 in totality. And what's interesting is you guys can look and you can go through and look at these price points. So as a seller's agent, right, as a listing agent, I'm going to go through and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is what we're seeing as far as contracting in the Denver metro. We are seeing buyers that are coming to the table with the affordability issue that we're running into in Colorado, and they're asking to have some of that pressure alleviated as far as using concessions goes. And we have the opportunity to talk about a concession, what they can be used for, and that's just going to elevate our status with that seller is like, hey, we want to get in front of this and I want to educate you. Now, on the other side of this thing, as a buyer, right? Buyers are looking at what rates are, right? Because what they're doing is they're looking at the rate and they're associating with the dollar and they're figuring out what their monthly payment is. And right then and there, they're deciding, can I afford that? And yet, what we understand with concessions is concessions can be used for rate buy downs. They can be used for warranties. They can be used for whatever the lender says they can be used for. They can pass through underwriting. And so, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I just want to let you know that at the price point that you told me that you're interested at, we're seeing about X amount of dollars, 8,000, 9,000, 12,000, 15,000, right? $10,000 is the average in April, which hasn't changed over the last 12 months. And we're able to do that to get some buy down. So would it be okay if I let you talk to my preferred lender and they can actually let you know that if we were to land in this price point and we were to get you that amount in concessions, which that's my job to help you get that, this is what your monthly payment would be. How does that sound? And
Yeah,
that's the conversation.
absolutely. All right. Douglas County readies residents for fire season. Despite the snow in the last couple weeks, um, we are seeing historic dry weather and predicting that we could see up to 9,000 wildfires this season. And drought's the big concern. 97% of Colorado in moderate or severe drought. We all know that the snowpack is still well below normal. I think I just saw that A Basin staying open one more week, so that's interesting. Douglas County is especially at risk. Fire calls increased from 85 to 143 over the last decade, and we know that June and July are always the elevated months. Um, Charles, how does this impact real estate?
Yeah, so when I think about this and I look at this, firstly, our mountain real estate agents, they understand this, right? This is nothing new to them. They're like, you know what, this is Monday. All right. And so what I think of when I look at this is what about some of our city agents that are going through and having these conversations? And so let's just play out a scenario where maybe most of my business is in the Denver metro and my buddy reaches out and says, hey, you know what, I want to go look up in the mountains for some houses. Well, what we have to understand is that there is insurance rates for Colorado, and then there's insurance rates for the mountains, and they're different. And so when we're going through and having these conversations, we have to understand that these are high impact areas for wildfires. And when we're looking, we should get ahead of these dates and deadlines, these contingency periods for insurability on a property because these are going to be some astronomical amounts of insurance premiums if they can even get insurance. So when we're looking at this, some of the things that we should be doing is making sure that okay, we understand this is going to be a higher impact area, plus all the things that have happened in the past, that this actually might be an issue for this particular area to be able to qualify for insurance. And Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, even if you qualify for the insurance, do you really want to pay that monthly cost that's going to be associated with it? And those are the conversations that we think that we need to be looking at as we're going through and just thinking about the drought that we've had.
Absolutely. All right, let's close it down. There's a proposed AI data center in Colorado Springs. and it's Project Taurus. It's near Garden of the Gods, could be one of the city's largest data centers. It looks like the residents nearby are pretty upset about this, Charles.
Yeah, so we look at this and we can have the conversation again, right? It's like, okay, what could happen? The noise, utility costs, energy usage, like all these things are super real, right? Like as we're going through and we're having this conversation today on this call, think about this saver switch program that Excel Energy runs. Think about all these times that there's these companies that are having to turn off power so that we have enough power for the energy grid. Think about the amount of water when we're thinking about these companies that are actually coming in and buying Colorado water rights. They're buying the land and they get X amount of water. They're taking the water and they're shipping it off to California. All very real.
Yeah.
And so now we're looking at this AI data center that is going to use an astronomical amount of energy, plus needs to cool down their products. They're going to be needing more water. They're going to be needing more utilities. This is going to have a big impact on rates. It's going to have a big impact on water usage if this gets approved. Because again, guys, we're right now we do have these water usage limits, and we're in May right now. I got mine the other day, and I get 2 days a week to water during certain times. And so now we're bringing in this data center, and the biggest question mark is like, okay, well, what's the benefit? How many jobs could potentially be created? Because I think that's the only thing we should be looking at. Like, awesome, as a real estate agent, how many jobs are going to be created? How many people could potentially move into this area because of this? Do I know the areas that could be impacted so I can get in front of this and maybe go see if I need to go buy a rental?
Right.
Right? Like, can I go buy a property and then rent it out to one of these potential business owners? But when they're running this data right now, they're saying this might only create 60 to 100 jobs plus use all of these resources. So
Mhm.
as this one doesn't super excite me, but we put it up here to say this. Guys, these are the things we should be tracking as real estate agents. If we're bringing in these big companies and these big companies are going to create X amount of jobs, as the real estate agent, we know that Gary Keller tells us that all transactions go through our hands first. So, should we be going out and figuring out what areas are going to be impacted and start talking to some of the consumers, or have you ever thought about selling because this thing's going in here? Or should we be looking to purchase up property that's for sale and turn it into a rental? And that goes nationwide. Like this should be on every one of our 411s and GPSs is to track these down and to figure out how many properties we're buying this year.
Yeah. So while the immediate benefit of 60 to 100 jobs is rather small, um, we know that like attracts like. So you get one of these, and then you might get another one,
Mhm.
and so it could signal a bright future there, and the risk of water and energy usage and utility costs is always something to think about as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you get your choice. You can either have an AI data center, you can have a senior living home, or you can have an emergency care. Like, which one would you prefer at this point?
Exactly. All right. So next week we're gonna do a little deep dive into the mountain communities around Colorado, and don't forget that we also next week have our regional rally. You don't want to miss that. Hope you all have a great Monday. Take care.
Thank you guys. Bye.